Hello, everybody. Long time no see. I think I don't remember when the last day that I recorded was. I know it was one day last week, but this weekend was just. Sometimes I'll get off from work and I'll come home and I won't be quite ready to go to bed yet, so I'll sit down and like read a section or two out of the book, but not this past weekend. I don't know. I got home and was like I needed to lay down. So it do be like that some weeks, but we are getting so close to being done with this. So, um, we are just going to pick up. We're still in the television chapter. We're making it a little bit more towards the end. And I would assume that I stopped down here at the bottom of this page where there's a new header that is called Controlling the Environment. So, we've talked about in sections previous, the ideas of Carl Jung and the doings of the Austrian painter, Freudian, psychological brainwashing. So now we are on controlling the environment. What became obvious to the brainwashers is that a new system based on appeal to emotionalism was needed. And in order to break through the population's moral compass, society needed to be reduced to infantilism. Writing in 1972, Tavistock's leading media expert, Dr. Fred Emery, reported on television's impact on Americans. Quote, "We are suggesting that television evokes a basic assumption of dependency. It must evoke this because it is essentially an emotional and irrational activity. Television is the nonstop leader who provides nourishment and protection," end quote. Like, that's crazy how they've used the TV to brainwash so many people, and that's straight facts. I mean, the infantilism, it's so true. Like, people, I hear people sometimes, they'll be talking like about a show, and I've even, gotten really excited or hyped about a show that has happened way less often. But I can remember even when I was like 12, 13 years old, Twin Peaks. I don't know if anyone's familiar with David Lynch and his weird ass movies, or they're kind of like art house cinemas. But I was like obsessed with that show when I was younger. And I think that's kind of a spiritual thing too, because there was some real dark themes and stuff in that show and in the movie. But anyways, so yeah, TV definitely has an effect on all of us, but the reducing down to infantilism, like, think about Star Wars, think about anything that has like a live action figure toy that goes along with it, that like adult males still engage in kind of this silly shit. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm not talking about like collecting, being a collector of some sort. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to collect all the freaking WWE pro wrestler, whatever, or what, go ahead. I'm talking about the people. It's like literally all they think. I mean, because I have a collection. I have a collection of perfumes, but that doesn't have anything really to do with the TV, and it's not like a TV character, and it's not like people you see walk around with Star Wars shit on and stuff. Like, no, you will never see me wearing no shit like that. Anyways, hold on. Okay, sorry, I think they're done barking. Okay. In this informative report on television's impact on cognitive powers of an individual, investigative journalist Lonnie Wolf says that both Emery and Eric Trist, who until his death in 1993 headed Tavistock's operations in the United States, noted that, quote, all television had a dissociative effect on mental capabilities, making people less able to think rationally. Viewers, as they become habituated to watching 6 hours or more of television daily, surrender their powers of reasoning to the images and sound coming from the tube, end quote. That's terrifying. So everybody's just walking around here. People that watch a lot of TV, anyways, are just walking around here, just, with their head in La La Land or something. Tavistock recognized that habitual television watching destroys the ability of a person for critical cognitive activity. In other words, it makes you stupid. For to bring society down to the level of a beast is especially important from the point of view of Tavistock, if they are to control the planet Earth, which it seems like they are. Quote, since the only source of increase of mankind's power as a species within and upon the universe is that manifold of validated discoveries of physical principle, it follows that the only form of human action that distinguishes man from beast is that form of action which is identified as cognition, by means of which the act of discovery of accumulated validatable universal physical principles is generated. It is the accumulation of such knowledge for practice in this way, from generation to generation, which defines the provable evidence of the absolute difference between man and beast, end quote. And, they talk about the zombie apocalypse. Bro, most people are out here are already zombies, okay? Like, legit. However, dissociative effect, however, dissociative effect is but one of the aspects of overcoming resistance and changing the habitual. What? I'm so tired, you guys. Please forgive. It's the same old story every week, especially if I'm recording on Sunday evening. I'm like, first of all, I can literally barely open my eyes. They're like almost swollen shut from sleeping so hard. And my brain is just not like catching up. Like normally I'm a very like expert level, reading aloud. Like I'm pretty good at it. That's why I decided to do this channel. And then I go to read and I'm like, but my mouth doesn't want to catch up with my brain. And me and a coworker of mine who is like legit at least 15 years younger than me, she was talking about how she's worried about her short-term memory. And I was like, girl, you. So if that is how the 30-somethings are feeling, I think she's in her 30s. She's definitely in her early 30s. She has to be. Anyways, I'm sorry. If that's happening to the kids, what hope do us old folks have? I mean, I'm not super old, but definitely middle-aged. Okay, so let me start over. However, dissociative effect is but one of the aspects of overcoming resistance and changing the established paradigm of society, according to brainwashers at Tavistock Institute. Listen to Theodore Adorno of Frankfurt School. Quote, it seems obvious that the modification of the potentially fascist structure cannot be achieved by psychological means alone. The task is comparable to that of eliminating neurosis or delinquency or nationalism from the world. These are products of the total organization of society and are to be changed only as that society is changed. It is not for the psychologist to say how much such changes are to be brought about. The problem is one which requires the efforts of all social scientists. All that we would insist upon is that in the councils or roundtables where the problem is considered and action planned, the psychologist should have a voice. I don't think so. We believe that the scientific understanding of society must include an understanding of what it does to people, and that it is possible to have social reforms, even broad and sweeping ones, which, though desirable in their own right, would not necessarily change the structure of the prejudiced personality. For the fascist potential to change, or even to be held in check, there must be an increase in people's capacity to see themselves and to be themselves. This cannot be achieved by the manipulation of people, however well-grounded in modern psychology the devices of manipulation might be. It is here that psychology may play its most important role. Techniques for overcoming resistance, developed mainly in the field of individual psychotherapy, can be improved and adapted for use with groups or even for use on a mass scale, end quote. So he's talking about brainwashing people, right? I mean, literally, that's what that whole paragraph was about. Quote, social turbulence. As a point of interest at Tavistock, Eric Trist and Frederick Emery developed a theory of, quote, social turbulence, end quote, a so-called softening up effect of future shocks, wherein a population should be softened up through mass phenomena such as energy shortages. Energy shortages. We're like there, aren't we? With all this data center stuff. It's not, I mean, it's not getting short, it's just getting expensive. Let's see, where was I? Okay. Economic and financial collapse or terrorist attack, which are all strategies they use on PSYOP level all the time on us. Quote, if the shocks were to come close enough to each other, and if they were delivered with increasing intensity, then it was possible to drive the entire society into a state of mass psychosis, end quote, claimed Trist and Emery. Yeah, like if you keep fucking with people's ability to get to work, to pay their bills, to feed their families, to keep the lights on, yeah, everybody's going to lose their shit. Like, the fuck? They also stated that individuals would become dissociated as they tried to flee from the terror of the shocking emerging reality, which is a simulated one. I keep telling y'all. People would withdraw into a state of denial, retreating into popular entertainments and diversions while being prone to outbursts of rage. End quote. In fact, we are talking about two sides of the same coin here. On one side, guiding the covert, subtle manipulation and control of thought and human consciousness through the power of television, while on the other side, directly and overtly shifting the paradigm, changing the basic concepts, widening the parameters, and changing the rules by which society defines itself. One of the key individuals involved in psychological warfare against the population through manufactured social turbulence is Kurt Lewin, a pioneer in group dynamics who was part of the early Frankfurt School and fled Germany when the Austrian painter took power. So he was probably one of those meddling Jays, I'd probably say, that the Austrian painter was like, out of here. Okay. This passage from his book, Time, Perspective, and Morale, shows his understanding of psychological warfare. Quote, one of the main techniques for breaking morale through a, quote, strategy of terror consists in exactly this tactic: keep the person hazy as to where he stands and just what he may expect. If, in addition, frequent vacillations between severe disciplinary measures and promises of good treatment together with spreading and contradictory news make the, quote, cognitive structure of the situation utterly unclear, then the individual may cease to even know when a particular plan would lead toward or away from his goal. Under these conditions, even those who have definite goals and are ready to take risk will be paralyzed by severe inner conflicts in regards to what to do, end quote. Over the past 50 years, research in the fields of psychology, sociology, and psychiatry has shown that the human mind is capable in dealing with a limited number of changes around it. According to Science Policy Research Unit, SPRU, at Tavistock, Sussex University facility, quote, future shocks is defined, quote, as physical and psychological distress arising from the excess load on the decision-making mechanism of the human mind, end quote. In other words, quote, a series of events which come so fast that the human brain cannot absorb the information, end quote. One scenario is called superficiality. And after continuous shocks, according to Emery and Trist, quote, the large targeted population group discovers that it does not want to make choices anymore, reducing the value of its intentions. This strategy can only be pursued by denying the deeper roots of humanity that bind people together on a personal level, by denying their individual psyche, end quote. Apathy takes over, often preceded by mindless violence, such as a characteristic of the LA street gangs in the 1960s and the 1980s, what Emery and Trist call organized social response to dissociation, as described in the pages of Anthony Burgess' novel A Clockwork Orange. A society dominated by infantile, animal-like rage, quote, such a group becomes easy to control and will docilely follow orders without rebelling, which is the object of the exercise, end quote. Add Trist and Emery, What's more, quote, the dissociated adults cannot exert moral authority over children because they are too involved with their own infantile fantasies brought to them through their television set, end quote. And if you doubt what I'm saying, look at the older generation today as they have accepted the moral decadence of the no future generation of its children rather than seek conflict. And in the process, the adults have come to accept lower moral standard. Boomers were looking at you. And now Gen X, we're looking at us too. And millennials, y'all are about to come into this fold too. Like, I feel like it's going to have to be the young ones that, like, the young based little conservative kids that are gonna like have to. I mean, there's some on the left that realize that this is a lie too. I think it's just a misguided direction that they want to go. You know, everybody. I feel like everybody on the fringes of the left and the right, they both see there's BS here, and we don't want any part of this mainstream like nonsense because it's not working, right? And some of them have ideas that go way far in one direction politically, you know, towards communists, and then others have other ideas that go in a way more severe right direction, you know, which can, I guess, lead to maybe fascism. They say that that's a right-wing thing, but I don't know. It sounds like a left-wing thing also to me in a way. So, but whatever. Okay, just as in Huxley's drug-controlled Brave New World, there are no moral or emotional choices to make here. The, quote, flower children and the drug-soaked rebellion of the Vietnam era is a perfect example of how this scenario functions. These, quote, frequent vacillations, end quote, pass through several scenarios. Stable, at which point people more or less are able to adapt to what is happening to them, or it is turbulent, quote, at which point people either take actions to relieve the tension or they adapt to accept tension-filled environment, end quote. If the turbulence does not cease or is intensified, then at a certain point, people cease being able to adapt in a positive way, end quote. According to Tristan Emery, quote, people become maladaptive. They choose a response to tension that degrades their lives. They start to repress reality, denying its existence, and constructing increasingly more infantile fantasies that enable them to cope. Under the conditions of increasing social turbulence, people change their values, yielding to new degraded values that are less human and more animal-like, end quote. This is disturbing. The second scenario is segmentation of society into smaller parts. I mean, here we are. Here we fucking are. In this scenario, quote, it is every group, ethnic, racial, and sexual against the other, end quote. Have we not been there for like, I don't know, 4 decades now? At least. I mean, since I've been here. Anyways, I've noticed that, you know, more increasingly so in the 90s, probably they started really trying to fucking ram it home. But like, you know, these even the first wave feminist movement, I mean, I don't think it was so anti-men. I think they just were wanting some friggin' rights. But like the second and the third waves, like, girl, what rights do you not have now? You know, you can vote, you can drive, you know, own property. What's your problem now? You know, so that's my deal with like second and third wave feminism. I think it's just a destructive divide and conquer tactic that is being put upon all the females in college. Like, this is where they're getting everybody, is in college, and that's why I quit, because I'm like, I'm not going to pay for you guys to like pit me against people, make me think that like all this doom and gloom and like the world's going to end because we're running out of resources. No, we're not. Resources are finite. The Most High created the system that way to sustain itself. Only because these sociopaths that we have elected, or not even elected, some of them have just put themselves in power. And they've developed some really disturbing weaponry as well that, you know, hordes of people wouldn't stand a chance against. So this is really turning very dark very quickly. If I do say. So, okay, so nations break apart into regional groups. Those smaller areas in turn fissure into even smaller areas along ethnic lines. Trust and Emery refer to it as, quote, enhancement of in-group and out-group prejudices as people seek to simplify their choices. The natural lines of social divisions emerge to become barricades, end quote. And that is what Tavistock has known from the beginning. That is what what's her face says. Now I can't even think of her name. The one that I've mentioned her before. She was an Ashkenaz working for Tavistock, talking about, the West has not yet learned to be multicultural, but we will see those birth pangs as we, through the Tavistock Institute, just start pumping third world immigration into all the white Western countries so that we can take them down, because we are the Ashkenazi Jays. We are the Shmayanists, and we believe that God promised us this 3,000 years ago, or whenever the F they think that they're trying to use the Bible to say that it is promised to them. All that shit's in the past, bro. So no. And this fucking place has been the heart and soul of what has been put upon us, and it is a crime. Okay, it's a crime. God, I almost had it. Her name, Barbara Spector. Barbara Spector. Go YouTube the video. It's like 3 minutes long. She is standing there in the Tavistock Institute office telling people that the West has not yet learned to be multicultural. Multicultural, the quote unquote melting pot. It's like that was a theory being tested. You know what I'm saying? When they were doing this with our country. And, to a certain degree, when it was still mostly Western people, because it is a Western culture that founded it, it was fine. But now that we have rammed all these different people in here, we have like small nations amounts of people groups in this country. And when they get ready, they're going to turn on all this confusion and all this batshit craziness, and it's going to be everybody against everybody. It's going to be tribalism, and that's what they want, bro. They know that a house divided cannot stand. Like Japan is for the Japanese, Mexico is for Mexicans, America is apparently for every fucking Tom, Dick, and Harry from every sub IQ, third world shithole. Okay, men, nothing but men with their sexual urges and their violence and shit unchecked, just being flooded. I know you've seen what's happening to Spain. I literally just watched them, like a short 2-minute video on social media. All these people from like Mauritania or somewhere, just coming. And the president told the military and the police to stand down. Just let them come on in. Let them come on in. And now it's still affecting us, okay? Your fucking tax dollars are going to pay for shit like this through the American Red Cross, who has funded like 70% of this humanitarian blah, 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 because they literally came, grown fucking men from Mauritania, from Africa, in boats to Spain, and they're whining, we don't have any blankets or pillows or anything to eat. Well, what did you think was going to happen? I'll tell you what they think is going to happen. They think they're going to be paid, they're going to be housed, and they're going to be fed. And they're exactly right, because of NGOs and because of rich, evil shitlords like George Soros, Bill Gates, and their ilk. They're aiding and abetting this agenda. Okay. Society's response to such a psychological and political disintegration is the Orwellian fascist state, modeled on his book 1984, which is a book that I read when I was like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12. My parents had a copy of it. And of course, I thought my parents were like so smart and cool. So I read a lot of their books. Yes, I did. And 1984 was one of them. So I've been peeping this, for a hot minute. In the book Big Brother, quote, Big Brother, who's like, Big Brother's watching, who's like basically the government arm of whatever in the book. Big Brother regulates the lives and conflicts of people within a society. A never-ending conflict, quote, is waged by each ruling group against its own subjects, and the object of the war is not to make or prevent conquest of territory, but to keep the structure of society intact, end quote. Quote, third scenario is the most intense, involving a withdrawal and retreat into private world, and a withdrawal from social bonds that might entail being drawn into the affairs of others, end quote. How is this level of dissociation different from today's 15 to 24 age group? Bro, I feel like them kids are cooked. How far removed are we from this moral and social outlook? Almost there, aren't we? Yeah, I'd say so. Trist and Emery are convinced that men will be willing to accept, quote, the perverse inhumanity of man that characterized Nazism, end quote. The perverse inhumanity of man that, okay, I just read that. Yeah. Okay, not necessarily the structure of the Nazi state, but the moral outlook of Nazi society. And that was also like an inside job, bro. It truly was. To survive in such a state, people will need to create a new religion. And they have done that, bro. They've done that. Okay, they have. Baha'i, which is like the blending together of all the nations. Bro, this mic is getting on my effing nerves. Hold on. Put it more to the side. It's like pulling my shirt down. That's very bothersome. Okay, come on, dude. Come on, dude. All right, that's better. Okay, let's see now. Okay, to survive in such a state, people will need to create a new religion. Wolf states that, quote, the old religious forms, especially Western Christianity, which is what has held the world together for a millennia, that's what they hate. They don't want the educated, well connected to the Creator, respectful of the earth and humanity and of human life, because this is a very anti-human agenda that is coming down the pipe, y'all. It's a very anti-human agenda. So you have to get rid of Christianity, because Christianity is very pro-human. It's very pro-freedom. It's very pro, it's like an individualist mindset. And the people try to act like Jesus was a communist. No, he freaking wasn't. Sorry. Just scoot up a little bit. Just scoot up a little bit. Okay. Okay. The new religious forms will be formed of mystical anarchism, a religious experience much likened to a satanic practice of the Nazis or the views of Carl Jung, end quote. This is the New Age. The Age of Aquarius, preached by Tavistock and Frankfurt School, with its Eastern mystical religious cults that had young brainwashed converts flocking to embrace this degeneracy. It is degeneracy. Again, it is television that provides the, quote, social glue that binds the minds of the population to their new religious forms. Newspeak, which is a term, hold on guys, like this is getting on my nerves. Okay. I was having a costume issue. All right, now, and this shirt, it's just like a little cheapy Walmart shirt. I mean, it's like pajamas. You know what I'm saying? I'm sorry. I literally I am in my pajamas still. Don't be mad at me. Okay, so we're on a new, excuse me, chapter. I mean, not a new chapter, a new header called Newspeak, which is literally a term from the book 1984. It's literally like what the government would hit you with, basically. Newspeak. Most Americans and Europeans alike believe that there is such a thing as free press. That's cute. One of the key areas in brainwashing the population. Most Americans and Europeans get most of their news from the state-controlled television, under the misconception that reporters are meant to serve the public. In fact, reporters do not serve the republic, just like the police. Reporters are paid employees that serve their media owners, whose companies' shares are traded on Wall Street. All right? Of the 6 to 8 hours per day Americans spend watching television, for example, a couple of hours is spent watching current affairs programming. Control over the media has been a long-term objective of the globalist elite. In February 1917, Congressman Oscar Callaway placed a statement in the Congressional Record describing the origins of what he called, quote, newspaper combination, end quote. According to that account, the J.P. Morgan banking interests and their allies, quote, got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States and the sufficient number of them to control generally the policy of the daily press in the United States, end quote. Today, the news media monopoly puts the number at 5 corporations controlling America's fourth estate, and I think it's now down to 3. I could be wrong, but I think it's now down to 3. As I explained in my book on the Bilderberg Group in 1993, August-September edition, the prestigious Dutch magazine Exposure outlined disturbing details about how the Tavistock Institute for Behavioral Analysis planned to control the boards of the 3 major and most prestigious television networks in the United States. Okay, NBC, CBS, and ABC. All 3 television networks came as spinoffs from the Radio Corporation of America, or the RCA. These organizations and institutions that theoretically are in, quote, competition with each other. This is part of the, quote, independence, end quote, that ensures Americans enjoy unbiased news, are in fact closely interfaced and interlocked with countless companies and banks, making it an almost impossible task to untangle them. Take NBC, for example. NBC has been affiliated with RCA, a media conglomerate, and is now a subsidiary of Morgan-controlled General Electric. On RCA's board sits Thornton Bradshaw, president of Atlantic Richfield Oil, and member of the World Wildlife Fund, the Club of Rome, the Aspen Institute for Humanistic Studies, and the Council on Foreign Relations. Wow. Like, just wow. Bradshaw is also chairman of NBC. Council on Foreign Relations is part of the Royal Institute for International Affairs. The RIIA is a front organization for the Roundtable Group, quote, stemmed from a secret society that created by British magnate Cecil Rhodes to unite the world, beginning with the English-speaking dominions over, quote, enlightened elitists like himself, end quote. Think Quigley, that wrote Tragedy and Hope. This front organization, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, had its nucleus in each area. The existing submerged roundtable group in New York, it is known as the Council on Foreign Relations, or the CFR. And everybody has heard of that, right? If you're American, you should. RCA's almost legendary role, however, was the service it provided to British intelligence during World War II. Of particular note, RCA's president, David Sarnoff, I wonder what kind of name that is, moved to London. At the time, Sir William Stevenson of intrepid fame moved into the RCA building in New York. Today, RCA's directorate is made up of British-American establishment figures that belong to other organizations such as the CFR, NATO, the Club of Rome, and the Trilateral Commission, Bilderberg, Roundtable, etc. Among the NBC directors named the Exposure article were John Bradamus, CFR, TC Bilderberg, a director of the Rockefeller Foundation, Peter G. Peterson from the Council on Foreign Relations, a former head of Kuhn, Loeb and Co., Rothschild, and a former U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Robert Cizik, Wonder what kind of name that is. Chairman of RCA and of First City Bancorp was identified in congressional testimony as a Rothschild bank. Clearly, the NBC board is considerably influenced by the Rockefeller, Rothschild, Morgan, Troika. Troika. Troika? What a weird word. Leading exponents of the One World Company Limited. ABC is owned by Disney Corporation, who is like so evil. It has allegedly, it has 153 TV stations. Chase Manhattan Bank controls 6.7% of ABC's stock, enough to give it a controlling interest. Chase, through its trust department, controls 14% of CBS and 4.5% of RCA. Instead of the three competing networks called NBC, CBS, and ABC, what we really have is the Rockefeller Broadcasting Company, the Rockefeller Broadcasting System, and the Rockefeller Broadcasting Consortium. On the ABC board of directors is Ray Adam, not Adams, Adam. Director of JP Morgan, Metropolitan Life, Morgan, and Morgan Guarantee Trust. All bankers. Interesting. Frank Carey, chairman of IBM and director of JP Morgan and the Morgan Guarantee Trust. John T. Connor, the counsel on foreign relations of the Conloeb Rothschild law firm. George Jenkins, chairman of Metropolitan Life, Morgan, and Citibank Rothschild Connection. Martin J. Schwab, director of Manufacturers Hanover, which is a Rothschild company. Isn't it strange how the same Rockefeller, Rothschild, Morgan characters on the board of ABC Network, which we are told is independent of NBC, appear to represent the competition? ABC was taken over by Cities Communication, whose prominent director is Robert Russa from the Council on Foreign Relations and Bilderberg, senior partner of Brown Brothers Harriman, which has close ties with the Bank of England. Russa and David Rockefeller are credited with selecting Paul Volcker to chair the Federal Reserve Board. Selection of Volcker formed part of Tavistock's plan for a permanent condition of social turbulence. So these fucks have just decided they're going to use the TV to control your mind, to make you think you know what's going on. Stop reacting to the shit on the TV. Stop. Stop paying them. Stop. So Tavistock, now we know, has a plan for never-ending social turbulence, okay? Such as the CFR's Project 1980s and its, quote, controlled disintegration of the U.S. economy. And now look. And now just fucking look. A dozen eggs is like $5. What are we doing? Like, I remember when growing up, when it was like under $1, you get a carton of eggs for like freaking 88 cents or something. I mean, even since 2020, literally the cost of everything has doubled. Period. Point blank. End of story. Everything. Groceries, gas, housing, transportation, all of it. It has doubled. Because of these assholes. I mean, okay, so let's just go back and reread this sentence, because I think it's important that we know this and that we realize this and that we really think about it and digest it and chew on it. What does it mean? What do we need to do to try to fight this? All right. Selection of Volcker formed part of Tavistock's plan for a permanent condition of social turbulence, such as the Council on Foreign Relations Project 1980s and its controlled disintegration of the U.S. economy, a pre-planned collapse carried out by Volcker and his high interest rate policy of the 1979-1982 period. So they've done it before, and now they're doing it again. And I think with each time, it's just going to get worse. CBS is owned by Viacom, which has over 200 TV and 255 radio affiliates nationwide. So think about that's all, and they're all parroting the same talking points. So do you see now how easy it is to brainwash freaking people? who think that they're informed when they're really just being brainwashed because they're listening to the radio and watching TV? Stop. Stop. I mean, dang, this huge media conglomerate owns, among other companies, MTV, Showtime, VH1, TNN, CMT, 39 broadcast and television stations, 184 radio stations, and Paramount Pictures. As an American intelligence officer, CBS founder William Paley was trained in mass brainwashing techniques during World War II at the Tavistock Institute in England. So, the guy who started the whole network of CBS was trained in mind control techniques. So, everybody has watched a show on CBS. We all have. I know we all have. Stop giving them your attention. Attention is currency. Stop giving it to them. The financial expansion of CBS was supervised for a long time by Brown Brothers Harriman and its senior partner, Prescott Bush. Oh, how fascinating. Father and grandfather to two presidents. Or father and grandfather to presidents. Not to two presidents. Even there was two presidents. Who is a CBS director. The board includes Chairman Paley, for whom Prescott Bush personally organized the money to buy the company. Harold Brown from the Council of Foreign Relations, Executive Director of the Trilateral Commission and former Secretary of the Air Force and of Defense of the U.S. How nice. Roswell Gilpatrick from the Council of Foreign Relations and Bilderberg from the Kuhn Loeb Rothschild law firm. Henry B. Schnacht. What kind of an interesting name is that? Director of the Chase Manhattan Bank, a Rockefeller Rothschild institution. The Council on Foreign Relations, Brookings Institute. Franklin A. Thomas, Council of Foreign Relations, head of the Rockefeller-controlled Ford Foundation. Newton D. Minor, Council of Foreign Relations, Director of the Rand Corporation, and, among many others, the Dictley Foundation, which is closely linked with the Tavistock Institute in London and the Bilderberg Group. The former president of CBS was Dr. Frank Stanton from the Council of Foreign Relations, who is also trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation and Carnegie Institution. So are the Rothschild and Rockefeller families, who are the leading groups in the tightly controlled field of communications, working closely with Tavistock Institute in London. Fox News, part of News Corp, with their daily Nuremberg rallies for couch potatoes, is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who owns a significant part of the world's media, amongst them his flagship publication, The Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal. MySpace and 20th Century Fox movie studio. Murdoch's media empire has been the main propaganda outlet for the perpetual war of the neocons and their Nazi minions. Then there's the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, or PBS, supposedly a public institution. According to its website, quote, PBS is a nonprofit media enterprise owned and operated by the nation's public television media stations. A trusted community resource, PBS uses the power of non-commercial television, the internet, and other media to enrich the lives of all Americans through quality programming and education services that inform, inspire, and delight. Available to 99% of American homes with television and to an increasing number of digital multimedia households, PBS serves nearly 9 million people each week. That's terrifying. End quote. End quote. That's terrifying. Anyways, this chapter doesn't seem to have any end in sight. I could continue to read to the next header, but we'll go a little bit over 45 minutes, but that's fine. Let's go. The cornerstone of PBS's programming was, until a few years ago, the evening television news program, The News Hour with Jim Lehrer. I remember that. Jim Lehrer is a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. How nice. For most of PBS's history, funding was provided by AT&T, a CFR company, Archer Daniels Midland, whose chairman, Dwayne Andreas, was a member of the Trilateral Commission, PepsiCo, a Council of Foreign Relations company, whose chief executive officer, Indra Krishnamurti Nuyi, I wonder where she's from, or he's from, is a Bilderberg and Trilateral Commission Executive Committee member, and Smith Barney, a Council of Foreign Relations company, one of the world's leading financial institutions. Furthermore, Smith Barney is interlocked with Citigroup, Inc., a global financial services company that is a member of the Bilderberg Group, Council of Foreign Relations, and Trilateral Commission. So they're all just like this. Okay? There is no independent news media. Even this shit on YouTube, bro, unless it's legit somebody like me with absolutely no freaking budget, okay? Like, I've got no agenda here than to wake you up. That's my only plan. That's my only hope, my only care, my only scheme. And I'm not even scheming. I'm just literally trying to read books to people until they go, oh, okay, yeah, I see it now. I see it now. Let's do something about this. I mean, that's literally like my only freaking hope here. So, I have no agenda, and I obviously have no money and to do fancy like editing crap. I mean, I do have a Mac laptop and iMac or whatever it's called, but I'm not very tech savvy, and my friend did help me download OBS, but I don't know how to use it. So until I get at least a new phone so that I can have like two cameras, and I want to be able to Google stuff while I'm actually recording. So we're going to get there though, friends. We're going to get there. We're going to slowly build this bad boy, and I'm just going to keep reading and keep exposing and keep hoping and praying that somebody that sees this, something clicks, something that I say clicks in their head, and they're like, their eyes open and they go, oh yeah, holy fuck. We are like the frog in the pot coming to temp. You know what I mean? So, okay. Journalists who participate in the News Hour are some of the best-known political pundits in the United States, such as Paul Gigot, David Gergen, William Crystal, and William Safire. All of them are members of Bilderberg Group, and they're all Zionist Jays, too, I'm pretty sure. But besides the point, all of them are members of Bilderberg Group, the Council of Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission, so they must be best buds. Would it be reasonable for us to suspect that PBS might not be quite as impartial or in certain delicate matters of public interest, such as the U.S. constitutional crisis envisioned by Brzezinski, the future of nation-state republics, and of national sovereignty? I wonder, would it be reasonable for us to suspect? Oh, okay. Still not convinced? Sorry, I keep reading the same shit over and over. I keep losing my place. Okay, a quote. American media elites practice a brutal, albeit well-concealed form of, quote, wartime news censorship. But the mechanisms of this control are now openly acknowledged. John Chancellor, the longtime NBC TV news anchorman, in his recent autobiographical account of life in the newsroom, the new news business, admitted that through formal structures such as Associated Press, informal clubs such as the New York Council on Foreign Relations, decisions are made on a daily or weekly basis about what the American people will be told and what stories will never see the light of day. David Rockefeller specifically identified the New York Times and the Washington Post as key media organs of the power elite. And I think that like companies like Media Matters definitely hand them their topics. You know what I mean? Okay, let's see. As Michael Chossudovsky explains on the pages of globalresearch.com, quote, historically, the New York Times, with utterly unwarranted self-assurance, designates itself the arbiter of, quote, all news that's fit to print, end quote, has served the interests of the Rockefeller family in the context of a long-standing relationship. The current New York Times chairman, Arthur Sulzberger Jr., wonder what kind of name that is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, son of Arthur Ox Sulzberger, and grandson of Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, who served as a trustee for the Rockefeller Foundation. Ethan Bronner, wonder what kind of name that is, deputy foreign editor of the New York Times, as well as Thomas Friedman, sounding kind of a little Ashkenaz there, among others, are also members of the Council on Foreign Relations. end quote. America's corporate media are an integral part of the economic establishment, with links to Wall Street, the Washington think tanks, Club Bilderberg, and the Council on Foreign Relations, and through them to the world's premier brainwashing center, Tavistock Institute. CFR, quote, is the premier U.S. foreign policy think tank in the United States and is one of the central institutions for socializing American elites from all major sectors of society, media, banking, academia, military, intelligence, diplomacy, corporations, NGOs, civil society, etc., where they work together to construct a consensus on major issues related to American imperial interests around the world. As such, the CFR often sets the strategy for American policy and wields enormous influence within policy circles, where key players almost always come from the rank and file of the CFR itself. I mean, and have you never noticed that, like, people that are like, they'll be like, you know, a CEO of a big agri company or a big chemical company, right? And they'll retire from that and then go to work in public office for the FDA or for the EPA or something like that. You know what I mean? It's very sus. Or the one, you know, that's been a good little boy and done what these companies wanted them to, can move from a job like from the FDA or the EPA into one of these companies to be more better compensated, I guess, on paper for fucking over the country and the environment and the people's minds and the everything, the health, all of that. Okay, how that made sense. Okay, let's see. Where was I? Okay, CFR's former president, Sir Winston Lord, made an interesting observation when he said that, quote, the Trilateral Commission doesn't secretly run the world. The Council on Foreign Relations does that, end quote. In his October 30th, 1993, quote, ruling class journalists, end quote, essay, Washington Post ombudsman Richard Harwood candidly discussed how the Council on Foreign Relations dominates the news media. Harwood described it as, quote, the closest thing we have to a ruling establishment in the United States. Its members are the people who, for more than a half a century, have managed our international affairs and our military-industrial complex, end quote. After listing the executive branch positions when then occupied by CFR members, Harwood continued, quote, what is distinctly modern about the council these days is the considerable involvement of journalists and other media figures who account for more than 10% of the membership. The editorial page editor, deputy editorial page editor, executive editor, managing editor, foreign editor, national affairs editor, business and financial editor, and various writers as well. The now deceased Katharine Graham, the paper's principal owner, represent the Washington Post and the council's membership, end quote, observed Harwood. These media heavyweights, quote, do not merely analyze and interpret foreign policy for the United States, they help make it, end quote. So the same people that are brainwashing you are literally making the laws. He concluded, rather than offering an independent perspective on our rulers' actions, the establishment media act as the ruling elite's voice, conditioning the public to accept and even embrace, quote, insider designs that otherwise might not be politically attainable. They're doing all kind of shit that is against our interests, bro. They are totally selling us down the fucking river. Y'all gotta wake up, bro. You gotta wake up. Okay, anyways, I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna upload and then I'll read again.